But I wanted to watch both of these videos back to back here and see what MadSkillz has to say as well.
Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be talking about the state of healing because this is honestly a important topic. It is a discussion video. I really want to know your opinions about this.
It's not important, let's be honest. Nobody cares about healers.
Blizzard has been trying to get healing right for a really long time, specifically in Mythic Plus content. And in this video, we'll talk about the state of healing in Season 4. We'll talk about what's happening in the World Within. We'll talk about how Blizzard is acknowledging or almost pushing towards a certain gameplay when it comes to healing, and that is going to be evident.
Oh shit, is he playing with now?
Let's go and get started.
That's
so first
sick.
of all, you probably have seen a lot of these Reddit.io really high Mythic Plus dungeons being done with 4 DPS. Now, I think a lot of people are
Oh shit, it's a Drogo meow.
what's happening here, because it's not necessarily true that the whole dungeon was completed with 4 DPS and there was no healer needed. I had to do this in Season 3 when I was pushing for Mythic Plus score as Resto Druid. You can look at a certain dungeon on certain affix and be like, hey, I'm gonna swap to Balance Druid. I'm going to do a portion of this dungeon until we make a hard healing check. Then I'll run out of the dungeon, I'll swap to Restoration.
That's insane. I mean, he genuinely felt like he's like pugging close to title range keys, and he genuinely felt like he had to play Boomy last season, which is like insane. I think it's insane to like have that expectation as somebody who, you know, not like, okay, I get it if you're trying to push some like crazy world first level content, you know, doing some stuff like that, but if you're in a pug and you're doing that, like, holy shit.
Druid, and I'll heal the rest of the dungeon as a healer. Now, because of how data is represented here, you will be shown as a 4 DPS group. And some people are misunderstanding the fact that you're probably doing a portion of the dungeon as a healer and the other portion as a DPS, which is also, you could argue, a problem at the heart of the state of healing. And this is so rampant in high key Mythic Plus pushing that the recent buffs to Balance Druid tier set, people are memeing that this is going to be more impactful to Resto Druid because it's switching game.
Actually,
you might ask yourself, hey MadSkillz, why the hell do I care what the top 1% are doing? You're not going to be doing these tactics or these strats and pokies. You're not going to be risking, again, in order to do a dungeon or a portion of a dungeon as 4 DPS, you need to really play well in terms of using defensives, in terms of using interrupts, in terms of using utility.
True.
You're not going to be doing that in pugs. Why do I care what the top 1% are doing? And that is because it all comes down to how Blizzard is approaching healer balance and healer design. So specifically in the World Within,
is he about to cook?
Druid, if you watch some of my videos, Restoration Druid has certain talents. For example, a talent that gives you Hard the Wild for 10 seconds every 1 minute. And then if you pick another new talent, you're able to heal true damage with certain abilities while Hard the Wild is active. So depending on your talent choice for a portion of a dungeon or something along those lines, you might be feeling like a discipline priest because your damage is going to be converted to healing. I made multiple videos about this, and honestly I got very mixed response in terms of this.
Now, I hate to call people out, but is this a cut here? Hold on, let's listen. Did he cut this?
Videos about this, and honestly, I got very mixed.
I mean, I'm not making fun of him. I'm laughing because I do this too. And this is like, you just go on some crazy rant about like random shit. And then you're thinking about it. You're like, I just need to take this. I just need to take this out of the video. I always love seeing cuts like this in videos, especially from guys like him who are pretty good at freeballing it and sending out a vid. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's like you sneeze or whatever, but the moment of that, what he was about to say, very clearly it was going to be a rant. Oh, wait, we can see the dungeon. Let's try and piece together how long his rant was that he cut it out. Okay, let's look. The background footage.
Healing. I made multiple videos about this, and honestly, I got very mixed response.
Oh, no, the video was put in post. Okay, the video was put in post, so it didn't change.
Of this design choice for Blizzard. A lot of people were saying, hey, I don't want to play a discipline priest, so I don't want to DPS. A lot of people, and this is something that stuck in my head, I play a healer to just heal. Now, I thought about this sentence. I thought about what it actually entails. Because, let's say, for example, if you did have some sort of affix in Mythic Plus dungeons where you basically only had to heal because you had no time to DPS, what would that look like? Maybe something like a constant grievous taking down where you legitimately cannot DPS because you have to heal 100% of the time. I'm fully confident.
Everyone would just be dead. Like, if that was an affix that you had to do that permanently, if you were trying to do a pug key with some healer that wasn't very good, you would just be permanently dead.
But then this kind of affix would actually drive a majority of healers away because it would just be too annoying to play. Because guess what? Think about this from Blizzard's perspective, and this is why this is a discussion video. I really want to know your opinions about this. Blizzard is kind of stuck in these... It's stuck in this position where, hey, if we make healing really hard, like in Dragonflight in Season 2, healers will complain. If we make healing easier... Let's
be clear, okay? Let's be clear. When he says healers complain, I think healers complaining when there's hard healing is a small percentage of it. I think a majority of the complaining is from the DPS and tank players that just fall over dead to air because their healer is struggling and they can't keep up, and they just fall over and they have nothing, there's nothing they can do. And that's the problem with making very, very hard healing encounters, right? That's the main issue with that. And why I think that they can't create a dungeon that requires someone to heal permanently.
Again, healers will complain because healers will be forced to DPS more, and the best healer in Mythic Plus might be a healer that provides the most damage, which we've seen happen in previous expansions. Again, I'm oversimplifying this because in Season 2, it wasn't only the issue of healing, it was also the issue that Holy Paladin had monopoly on spot healing, and all the other healers' spot healing was really, really weak, and therefore Holy Paladin was really overpowered. He could meet all the spot healing needs. And then Blizzard in Season 3 and Season 4 kind of gave spot healing for majority of healers, or buffed it. And this comes down to the fact, what is the right approach? What is the design approach for healing in this expansion and in the next expansion in terms of the War Within? Blizzard has, in my opinion, acknowledged the fact that healers have to DPS. Now, as a Resto Druid, in my opinion, they implemented a pretty decent way of encouraging that because it is an optional talent. If you're someone who plays Resto Druid, who likes to kitty weave, who likes to heal, or who likes to DPS, especially in Mythic Plus content, you might, again, log into the War Within and you'll be able to talent into certain choices that will heal through damage. And if you're someone who doesn't like that, you might not talent into it and just play how you like to play, which honestly feels like it's trying to cater for both worlds. But it's important to highlight the fact that Blizzard is acknowledging that healer DPS is a thing. And again, let me know how you feel about healer DPS, because, for example, Holy Priest for me...
I feel like the whole healer DPS thing is actually a little bit overblown, and it's a little bit out of date. I think in Shadowlands, that was a big issue. Shadowlands was the first sort of expansion that people were not only getting good enough that they realized that healers just didn't really need to heal. Like, healers could spec full damage, trinkets, full damage, everything, and still be able to stay alive in the encounters. And people just got good enough where you had to do that, right? If you think about the player, you know what I mean? Like, for instance, doing damage as a healer, does it impact your dungeon run that much? I mean, a little bit, but not really. But like before, there would literally be healers in the top 3 in the world that were not even optimizing for damage, that were literally just like, I'm just going to be a healer and I'm just going to heal. Not that they were doing 0 damage, but they were, you know, they were not really caring about their damage. That would be a joke now. Like, literally, if you look at every healer in the top 10, the top 20, every single healer is maybe not being a monkey, but they all try and care about optimizing damage. And I think that's just a matter of people getting better and better and better at the game. Like, now we're talking about title range, right? And title, even like if you're a title range healer, you're trying to do damage. I don't know. I think it's just everyone getting better and like trying to min-max in a sense. But at the same time, I think nowadays it's actually a little bit not so important. Maybe I'm just an idiot, or maybe I'm turning into a casual, but I actually feel like healer damage is kind of a meme right now. And most of your damage that you end up doing is like AoE and like doesn't really speed up the dungeon that much. As a Resto Druid, for example, if you take away Sunfire and you take away your Tome Trinket, which is basically like all AoE pad, you're not really doing that much damage. A lot of your overall damage is just coming from like AoE when you're literally playing with a Warlock who's doing 3 million DPS, right? Oh, I'm doing 250k DPS on this pull, but you have a Shadow Priest doing 2 million, you have a Warlock doing 3 3 million. I just feel like your damage isn't that important. Obviously, if you're trying to go faster than the next team and you're competing at a very high level, it is important, but I don't necessarily agree with that in terms of every healer just needs to do DPS. But I do think it's something that you have to think about at the high end. We sort of like seesawed in two different ways. In BFA, healing felt like it was in a good place, but also everyone kind of sucked at Mythic Plus. Then in Shadowlands, everyone kind of was starting to get good at M Plus, and they sort of realized like healers can just be really big monkeys, and the whole healer meta was just about Vesper Totem and doing a bunch of damage and Ashen Hollow, right? And so what did they do? In Dragonflight, they made healing insanely difficult, but that had a reverse implication of it, right? Where playing low-level pugs was miserable when you have healers that, you know, were struggling because, you know, I talked about it in the raid discussion yesterday, but whenever one person in your group or party or raid has the control to just wipe everybody because of their mistakes, it's frustrating. It's not fun. In general, if you die, if you make a mistake, okay, maybe in a high-level content, really high-level content, you can cause a deplete, you know, you can cause a wipe, but in general, like, you literally wouldn't even be able to finish a key if you had a healer that wasn't, you know what I mean? I'm sure a lot of healers quit the game not being able to heal in Ruby Life Pool's first boss or third boss or whatever, and I don't think it's okay for healing to be that crazy. In general, it's just hard for scaling difficulty to happen as a healer. It's hard to make an encounter difficult for someone like JB or Jack or Zalia, and then also a reasonable challenge for somebody who's like, hey, I'm learning Resto Druid. I normally play Boomy, but I'm going to try Resto Spec. Here I go. Either one of those people is going to be bored or one of those people is going to get freaking owned. And unfortunately, you just can't really, it's hard to create a balance there when it comes to M plus and scaling.
Type of healer that was the last bastion of defense. Now, I'm saying it in such a way that it's almost negative, but it is or has been a classic type of healer where a lot of new players could come in and join Holy Priest. Again, Holy Priest damage for a long time wasn't really all that great. You weren't really all that much encouraged to deal damage as a Holy Priest. You were kind of almost like a support healer in Shadowlands with Night Fae and things like that.
Yep.
For the longest time, Holy Priest was there to introduce, in my opinion, almost to introduce new players to healing and how to heal.
There you go, Zach. That Holy Priest was for you. It was just put in the game to introduce you to learn how to heal. You were a little baby. So honestly, I think I actually kind of like the archetype, by the way, of a healer that buffs. I know that it creates a huge mess in terms of parsing and raid, and I don't really have a solution to it, but I think the idea of playing a healer and you go into a dungeon and you're not dealing that much DPS yourself, but you have a lot of high impact abilities that you can use on your teammates that, if you're using them correctly and you're aware and you're coordinating, can do a lot. And if you're not, then it's kind of like whatever, right? I think Night Fae Holy Priest was actually a really cool way to play the game. And I think that I'm kind of waiting for, like, I don't know, the problem is it's just so disruptive to raid and people care so much about parses and being fair and all that. But I do think in dungeon gameplay specifically, if you gave Og a bunch of healing spells, like some weird combination between Og and Preservation, like I think that would be like a really cool class. You're buffing your teammates. You're not really doing a lot of damage yourself. You know, you still can have a very high impact with your, like, I don't know. I think Og was just too powerful and it made season 2 miserable. But I think that for people that want to play healer but don't want a DPS, I do think like some sort of buff support playstyle could be good. The problem is just no healer ever has enough to make it interesting. You know, like you have just PI, you have just Blessing of Summer, you have just Fey Guardians or whatever.
In the last, again, we've seen this in Season 3, Blizzard has reworked Holy Priest in such a way that, again, you can sacrifice your healing in order to provide more damage by using, for example, Divine Word with Chastise. You have this gameplay loop between Chastise and Holy Fire. And this kind of gameplay is absolutely insane in terms of the amount of DPS you can do if you're allowed to DPS. In terms of looking at some of the DPS chart, Holy Priests are absolutely insane. And now Blizzard, in my opinion, has acknowledged.
What is this chart? Huh? I'm just gonna look at this part here and see what that means.
The fact that, hey, if you're playing a Holy Priest, one of the big advantages of playing Holy Priest in something like Mythic Plus content, you're able to pump some meaningful damage if you're allowed or choose to do so. So now you have some meaningful reworks happening or happen to Holy Priest in terms of giving you more incentive to deal damage. Resto Druid in the War Within in terms of healing through damage. And that kind of spurred this whole video in terms of the discussion video. What is the right way to do? There's no way Blizzard is going to please everyone here, because let's be honest, there's a lot of players out there who just don't want to DPS. I think it's very important to acknowledge the fact that the classic style of healing, especially in Mythic Plus, is kinda dead unless you're not doing high enough content where it really matters. If you're a type of healer who just heals and just sits there and waits for the party to need healing, and you're just sitting there and doing nothing, that type of gameplay is steadily dying out, at least when it comes to min-maxing your healer in hierarchies. And Blizzard has definitely acknowledged the fact that healers do damage in these Mythic Plus keys, especially if there's nothing going on. Healer will, for example, let's say the whole party is full HP and you have nothing to do, there's mobs out there, you will press Moonfire, Sunfire's Restful Druid. You will do some damage, and if you're someone who really likes to optimize DPS, you might do some kitty weaving, which requires a lot more skill and effort in order to optimize. And I think there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to be unhappy about this because they didn't roll a healer in order to DPS. But I also think, how do you solve this issue? Is this a problem to be solved? Because
yeah, I think the second part there is the most important thing. Is this a problem to be solved? In my opinion, right? Let's say you're a healer and your mindset is, I just want to heal. I'm not gonna DPS. Well, okay, like, you're just not very good. Can you reach very high levels and eventually get good? You know, if you want to purposefully hamstring yourself and not press buttons that are on your keyboard, you can do that, right? Everybody has a right to do that. If people are going to make fun of you or not make fun of you, I mean, that's their prerogative, right? Like, they can do whatever they want. Personally, I feel like if you are in a pug and you go through a key smoothly and not very many people die, chances are you probably time the key with some decent time left and no one's really ever upset. So generally, when someone's making fun of you for doing 0 damage, it's also because the key went to shit. And I don't know, I feel like in general, I think healers a lot of times have this like abused puppy mentality. I think tanks also kind of do. The thing is, healers and tanks are just playing the game, but DPS players, they have to wait 1 hour to queue to get into a dungeon every time, right? So when a DPS player gets into a dungeon and things aren't going well, they're angry and they need to take it out on the healer and the tank, because they're gonna be stuck in, like, a healer and a tank, they can be like, hey, you know, sorry guys, this didn't go that well, I guess we'll just go into the next dungeon. But as a DPS, you're stuck in Veldraken flying around doing Dream Surge for the next hour because no one's gonna accept you into a group, right? So you're mad when the key goes south. And I think that turns into a lot of tanks and a lot of healers playing the game or thinking in such a way where they're just trying to not get yelled at. I almost feel like everyone is always so worried about, oh, if are you doing DPS because it's the right thing to do? Are you doing DPS because you're scared that you're going to get made fun of? You know, I feel like a lot of times people do things because they're scared that their teammates are going to like be upset at them or make fun of them. I think when it comes to healer DPS, that's where some of that comes from. And it's like, if you don't want to DPS or you don't really care about running DPS gear, then just like don't. I don't know. Yeah, my dot does 500 DPS. Like, exactly. Like, well, then just, it doesn't matter. I don't know. I feel like healer DPS, I think, is a bit of an overblown subject. And I think that what Jack talked about is like some of the structural problems with the way that mechanics are balanced, which is why healers are playing for DPS or whatever. But to be fair, you know, again, what MadSkill said at the beginning was, well, if you're not in the top 1%, it doesn't really matter, right? You're not really gated by the timer. You know, you're not really worried about your healer doing damage. And if anything, as a DPS, you don't want your healer to be a monkey. I haven't really met with too many players that want their healer to be a monkey. Dorky kind of seems like he says that he wants his healer to be a monkey, but at the same time, as soon as stuff goes south, or as soon as, like, you know, he wants his healer to be a monkey, but then also be able to live through every single healing check and get through every scenario. So that's why he plays with Ellismere and not me. But for the most part, almost everybody prefers to have a healer that is focusing on healing and trying to keep people alive, rather than, oh, I need a healer that's trying to do massive amounts of damage.
Let's be honest, there's always going to be times where there's nothing to do as a healer and you kind of want to provide or kind of need to provide that extra damage because there's nothing else going on. I have to also really highlight the fact that healer damage is not as impactful as people make it out to be. And a prime example of this, in really high Mythic Plus pushing groups, depending on the dungeon you're doing or affixes, your group might ask your healer to swap to a DPS for a portion of a dungeon and they rather risk.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like he's over exaggerating that a little bit. I went through all of season 3 and I wasn't asked to swap the DPS a single time. Like, I was like learning Boomkin. Just, I mean, to be fair, like I wasn't really playing with that many like high level. I played like a lot early season or whatever, but yeah, kind of crazy if groups are asking you to do that. So I don't know. Here's something to think about while we watch the rest of the video. What if healers and tanks just did DPS damage? Like, what if you just always had to have, or maybe not DPS damage, but what about like 75% of DPS damage, right? What if DPS did 500k and then healers and tanks did 350k? But the thing is, the tanks and the healers also had that other responsibility, right? Number one, healers still had to heal and tanks still had to tank. And then number two, you weren't allowed to play 5 tanks or 5 healers or anything, right? I feel like that could be an interesting solution. Super buff healer and tank damage and just let them have fun because there's not enough healers and tanks anyway.
Running a dungeon without the healer, because the damage that a DPS can do is significantly higher than what a healer can do, even if the healer is focusing on DPS for majority of the time. And this begs the question, should healer DPS be increased to play a large...
Okay, I genuinely didn't pre-watch. I actually just...
part in the group success in order to reduce this type of mentality that is happening in hierarchies. Again, let me know how you feel about this. And this is why I'm making this video, because Blizzard is not going to please everyone here. I want to know your opinions. If Blizzard makes healing too hard, a lot of healers are going to complain, because I understand the sentiment. Healers have to meet healing checks, they have to DPS, they have to provide utility, they have to deal with affixes a lot of the times, and they're at the mercy.
Kind of an interesting add-on that he... See this weak aura that he has in the top? It's almost kind of like the spell casting bars that we have, except for they're like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
DPS, they have to provide utility, they have to deal with affixes a lot of the times, and they're at the mercy of...
That's like on the top of his screen.
Defensive cooldowns. It can sometimes feel all too much, especially if the healing checks are really, really high. And on the other hand, if healing is made too easy, a lot of focus is going to be placed on healer DPS, and we've seen this in the past, where the best healers are the healers that provide the most damage. And who knows, maybe if this is going to be the route that Blizzard focuses on later on down the line, the best healers are going to be the healers that have the best DPS off spec. For example, maybe Resto Druid is going to be the best healer because he can swap for a portion of the dungeon to Balanced Druid, and Balanced Druid is doing really well. Again, this is an over exaggeration, but something to really think about. I'm going to finish up the video with my personal opinions. I've been healing for a really, really long time in World of Warcraft, and I started off healing as a healer who just presses heal buttons. DPS was not even... It didn't even come into my mind as an option as a healer when, again, this is years and years ago when I was playing. But over the time, I slowly realized that, hey, you have a lot of time as a healer. You don't have to keep everyone topped up at 100% of the time, because if you know the damage patterns, you can optimize your DPS.
Now it's Dragonflight, and you do have to have them, because if they're at 95% health, then they're going to get one shot. How we go in full circle.
Fluctuated from being very good to being very poor to almost not even required. To an extent, in certain expansions, healer DPS was the main point of making a healer meta. So I've seen fluctuations in healer damage for a really long time. I think healer DPS in Dragonflight is a little bit overrated in terms of timing and key. I think it's more about survivability rather than DPS. And I have embraced fully healer DPS concept because I play this game a lot and I play every single healer. And a lot of these dungeons that I do, whether it's going to be pugs or whether it's going to be organized content, I will try to do as much damage as possible to see if I can beat my record in order to keep it interesting or entertaining. Here's the problem. This is coming from...
That kind of sounds like a monkey POV.
Full time. I spend an ungodly amount of hours playing healers in World of Warcraft, and maybe I have lost touch of perspective in terms of what it feels like to play this game in a more casual capacity. Someone who does pug content and does organized content, there is
just a bunch of trees up
between healing a
let's see if they die here
versus healing an organized group.
He cuts the video and goes to a new clip. Oh, let's run that one back real quick. So he's a professional World of Warcraft player, okay? So then the tank doesn't clear enough trees. Everybody's like scrambling to try and see what to clear. There's 2 trees up.
And those organized content, there is a huge difference between
to be fair, he's got everybody tots.
Healing an organized group.
And cut. All right, let's look at Halls of Infusion.
And this is why I think Blizzard is stuck in this really hard place. Do we balance healing for groups? Do we balance healing for the top 1% pushing the highest keys in the world? Do we encourage healers to do damage? Do we allow healers to do healing through damage? Do we push towards this? Do we try to eliminate the fact that certain high mythic plus pushers are bringing 4 DPS for a portion of a dungeon? Do we try to eliminate that and give healers more DPS so you don't do that? All I can say is that I do not envy Blizzard's position here in terms of trying to fix or balance healing, but I think it's very clear that Blizzard is taking certain sides or accepting certain truths about healing, especially when it comes to Mythic Plus content. So guys, let me know how I feel about healing, and I do want to mention Final Fantasy because it is another very popular MMO.
What?
I don't really play Final Fantasy, so I don't know exactly what it entails, but...
What do you think he's going to say here? I want to mention Final Fantasy. I don't play it, but let's let him cook here.
A lot of people tell me that healing in Final Fantasy, you're almost like a hybrid DPS kind of spec. And I almost feel that there is a possibility that Blizzard might decide to go that direction in the future. Maybe modern WoW healing needs to be completely reworked. Maybe it's fine. Maybe, again, there's just so many different things that could change with healing, or maybe not change.
By the way, this is, well, I'll let him finish. It's almost done.
Maybe Blizzard should stick with what they have, or maybe Blizzard should modernize the whole genre of a healer in World of Warcraft. Let me know how you feel about this. Let me know if you like this video. You can, again, feel free to agree and disagree with the things I'm saying here. It is a complete discussion video, and because it is
very fair, true. I always like his grounded takes. So here's, I posed the question of what happens if tanks and healers do DPS level damage, and no one actually said the problem. The problem is that healer and tank rotations, specifically healer DPS rotations, are super easy. As a resto shaman, you're literally flame shocking the boss, lava burst, and then lightning bolt if you don't have lava burst, right? That's your whole rotation. They're insanely easy. So the problem is, as a mage, you could literally be doubling or more your DPS if you're playing better. So if healers and tanks are doing 75% of the damage of a good DPS, that means they're literally beating pugs, right? Because it's not hard to do. You know what I mean? Like someone who's in a lower level pug, if you're like know what you're doing and you're like DPSing as a healer, if you really do that much damage, you're literally going to be beating DPS and pugs. You know, especially keep in mind either classes that are like very technical, like mage, maybe dot classes like boomkin that want the mobs to be alive for a long time. You're going to make people's experience fucking miserable as just like out DPSing them when they're playing boomkin or when they're playing whatever. Some people might say, I don't like boomkin. I don't care, let them lose to the holy priest. But you know, that's what I think the major problem is that as a healer, if you're doing the top like that much damage at a low level content when people suck, you're gonna be just like completely outperforming and blasting everybody. But anyway, 2 great videos here. I'll link both of them. I'd appreciate if you guys like, comment, and subscribe because we link their content. Yeah, I've had these bookmarked for a couple days since I saw Jax.